Hey Flockers, this is Sarah.
And this is Jenny, and you're listening to Naked with Socks, where we
Assess the mess with finesse. Welcome back, everyone. And if you are joining us for the fourth time, that is crazy. Thank you for listening still. And
281 downloads. We're super popular.
Yeah, that's exciting. So if you've listened to one, two, all, that's awesome. Thank you.
It's fun when people come up to us, and say stuff.
Now it's getting to a point where, we go out somewhere and people are like, oh, TAWE, or, they say something.
It's very cute.
Where
we got a shout out.
We got a shout out.
The other night.
Yes.
That's great.
I have to kind of go into that because that was kind of funny. My parents were there.
Oh yeah. Do they listen to the podcast?
I don't know. I just got so nervous. And it was like the guy on the stage that was playing music. I sang a song with him. And I was getting off the stage and he was like, oh, they have a new podcast. And my parents are there. And I was like, oh shit. They're going to go listen to their baby girl cuss.
I called my parents and
did you?
Gave them a heads up. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On the day of episode 1. I was like,
that was smart.
Guys, I'm gonna air some dirty laundry.
Just FYI.
Yeah, 100. They were told my mom was great and super supportive.
Yeah.
My dad probably listened secretly but would never admit it to me. So hi mom and dad, if you're listening.
Like my parents are probably the same. They've probably, well, I don't know. But anyways, I wanted to be like, yeah, we got a podcast. And I just got all clammed up. I was like, ooh. But
well, again, this is about us. It's not about them.
It's about us, yes.
This is our journey, our perspective, all of it. So thank you for joining us.
Okay, before we get into the purpose of today's podcast, because we are finally diving into subjects, not talking about ourselves anymore.
They're still going to happen.
It's still going to happen, but not to that extent. But before we get started, Jenny, what are we drinking? Do you want me to say it or do you want to say it?
You named it, and it's quite a unique name. It's inspired by our podcast today.
Yes. So this drink right here is called, cheers, it's called the Native Empiricist. And those two terms have to do with today's podcast. So, Jenny, what's in the drink today?
It's strong. Let me just tell you that.
It is really strong.
This is definitely, I wouldn't say a poolside sipper. I'd say
what is this?
Like a brunch one and done.
One and done. This is why it's in such small, little flutes.
Yeah, which we just got new glassware.
Yes. I went to Goodwill and went fucking ham. I was just went down a shelf and just was all in the cart.
We'll add pictures.
Yes.
It's a shot of tequila.
Mm-hmm.
A splash of lime juice. We did fresh squeeze limes, splashed that in there, and then topped with champagne.
So how much champagne? Just till it got to the brim?
Yeah, so you just top it off. You fill it up. So literally a shot's one, and I do a little bigger shots. So it's ounce and a half, 2 ounce shot, a splash of lime juice, and then you just fill it up with the champagne. It's gonna make you giggly. It's gonna make your
so if we're extra giggly tonight,
tummy feel warm.
It is. It definitely has a warm. It's good. It's definitely good.
It's like a bubbly tequila.
Yes.
So
I don't think I've ever had champagne and tequila together.
Me neither. This is a whole new world. I'm not sure if I'm gonna venture.
I feel like the name that we named it is good because it's just as strong.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So we highly recommend trying this at home, kids.
Yes. And we just had a quick dance session because we are ready. We are ready to dive in.
Because this tequila and champagne is kicking in.
Hell yeah. Okay. So, Jenny.
Purpose of today's podcast.
What are we going to talk about today?
Nature versus nurture. The ultimate debate.
The ultimate debate. It's true. It's such a big topic.
I'm probably going to use my notes a lot in this episode
Yeah.
just to refer back to, because I like to keep things very analytical, you know?
No, that's good.
So what is nature versus nurture? Like, what exactly
what
are
does
we
that mean?
talking about? Which particular aspects of behavior are a product of either inherited, like genetic, or learned or influenced from our environment?
Okay.
That is what the debate is about.
Okay. So it's how your genetics play a part in who you are as a person versus you're born a blank slate and you come into an environment and that environment fills you up and you're influenced, and who you become is because of that environment. Yes. Okay.
So something that's really interesting is there's definitely two different sides of the spectrum.
So from the research that we have done, a nativist is someone that believes that characteristics such as behavioral tendencies, personality attributes, and mental abilities are also wired in before we are even born. And the basic assumption is that the characteristics of the human species as a whole are a product of evolution, and that individual differences are due to each person's unique genetic code. Makes sense.
Perfect. Well said. The empiricists believe the opposite. So your psychological characteristics and behavioral differences that emerge through infancy and childhood are a result of learning. This is really similar to the behaviorism theory. So like what I studied in school. They're, like you said, their basic assumption is that at birth, the human mind is a blank slate and is gradually filled as a result of life experiences.
Yeah.
So we learn. So why do we give a fuck about this?
Yeah, what is this? Why do we care? How does this make us any different?
I, first of all, want to point out that you and I, which is part of the whole reason we started this podcast.
Exactly.
Are completely different humans from literally different sides of the country who were raised completely different.
Yeah, polar opposites.
Very religious, very conservative, very unorthodox.
Yeah.
Other things. And
I like how you said unconventional in your episode. I loved how you said that.
Unconventional parenting.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to call it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and now look at us today. Everyone says, oh, you're a product of the environment. You're a product of your environment. Or, you know, you're a creature of habit, which is true.
Right.
But the environments we grew up in were completely different. And we have such similar views and tastes on a lot of things, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. And I see, even though we have such a different upbringing, we are still very strong-willed, driven people. Like that, and just because of the way we were raised, it didn't make us not be that. Like, you know what I'm saying?
So that leads to the genetics.
Genetics, yeah.
The strong-willed. So I read this book, Parenting the Strong-Willed Child, because I have one.
I have one too.
We both have one.
And I'm sure if you're listening and you know me, you know which one.
If anyone's wondering which one of the twins it is, it's Copeland. So basically this book says that, and I'll link it, it's by two doctors with PhDs. There's clinical research evidence behind it, that if your child is born with this personality trait, this quote unquote strong will personality, it's a temperament basically, that they will either end up being CEOs, the president of the United States, very successful, or end up in jail and on drugs. So
sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
These are the reality of strong-willed children.
You're like, oh fuck, I have to like make sure my child doesn't turn into this.
Yeah, so if you're born with it, which is the whole genetics part, the nature.
Yeah.
That's great, but it's really how your environment shapes you growing up on what to do with it and how to, based off your experiences.
Yeah, it's crazy to me too to think about how siblings that grew up in the same home can be such opposite human beings.
So there's twin studies. We talked about twin studies a little bit. Yep. And having twins myself, I find it absolutely fascinating. Mm-hmm. They were in the same womb. They came out at the same time. That I'm telling everyone.
She won't tell us which baby is A or B.
It's an experiment. Yeah. They eat the same things. They sleep at the same time. They literally share underwear. They are raised exactly the same, but they have two completely different personalities.
Yeah.
Caden does not have that strong-willed trait, that temperament.
Yeah.
And I think you can see it in Micah and Nora also, where Nora is that powerful, strong,
she's very vocal. She will definitely tell you what she's feeling, and if she's upset about something, she has no problem.
They're determined.
They're very determined. She's always been that way. And it's not like it's a negative thing, but it's something that you definitely have to steer. They have different temperaments. Knox and Noah, Micah. I don't know who Noah is. I actually have a nephew named Noah, so it works out perfectly.
I think I was thinking Nora and Micah.
I was like, who is this Noah?
Knox and Micah play so well together. Yes. I've never seen them fight.
Never. It's like a dream. Watching them play is a dream.
They have the imaginations of just Disney World.
I know. It's like, I'm not even kidding you. It's like having a play date with your kid and someone else's kid, and it's like it never goes wrong.
A perfect play date.
Never goes wrong.
So if we only had one children instead of all of them, our lives would be so great.
God. And it just shows, again, how we're talking about siblings that grow up in the same environment can be so different because of what?
Yeah. So what is your take on nature versus nurture? Is it nature or is it nurture? Or is it both? What do you think?
I definitely think it's both. But sometimes I feel as if if you're genetically predispositioned a certain way, that can emphasize a behavior. So I definitely see where genetics can influence a behavior. So if you are more prone to, let's say you have a certain amount of genes that can link you to being more prone to depression, and then you grow up in an environment where it kind of, stimulates that, all of those feelings or whatever, a traumatic situation in someone's life. Or
just if you weren't taught coping skills and how you were taught to manage your feelings of depression.
So an example of what I'm talking about, we'll use the example of alcoholism, which is perfect one we could talk about. And one of the articles we'll link, it talked about alcoholism, and it was saying that alcohol addiction can recur in families, that certain genes may influence how alcohol tastes and the way it affects the body. A genetic predisposition to alcohol addiction may be far more significant if one is routinely exposed to binge drinking or other forms of alcohol abuse and comes to view this as a natural or normal alcohol use. It's normal. So do you see what I'm saying? How if nature played a part in
their environment,
their nurture. And the nurture of where they were growing up, where now they may become an adult and have an alcohol problem.
So almost like in the home that I was growing up in, drinking was normal. Binge drinking, not just normal drinking.
Yeah.
We drank a lot. And that was kind of their coping mechanism. And now as an adult, I use it as a coping mechanism also.
Yeah.
Were your genes, you have addiction in your family?
Yeah, I do. In some, not an immediate family, but I do I am related to people that have dealt with alcoholism, depression, anxiety. So,
do you feel like the home that you were raised in played a part in keeping you away from that?
Keeping me away from it? I mean, yeah, because I was never really exposed to alcohol growing up. So it was something that I honestly didn't even really know what it was until later on in life. I just didn't know what alcohol was. But I mean, you could go the opposite way where a kid doesn't know about something and then they go out and they go full force into it.
Go binge into it, yeah.
Exactly. So
I feel like that was my mom's logic. She would be like, you should drink this at home and you should know about it and how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
And that way you're not an idiot out in the real world, which I still was an idiot, but.
But to my point of talking about like, am I more nature or nurture? I think that from my perspective, I think that they both can play a big part. And if you're more genetically dispositioned for a behavior and you're in an environment that's like enabling that, it can make it, come alive.
What about serial killers or murderers or the quote unquote evil people?
What do you think?
I think that is more nature.
Nature.
I really do. I think that people are exposed to traumatic events. Even just some of the kids that I've worked with, like in foster care, some of the things that they've gone through, that they've seen, it's traumatizing. Do I think that that's going to have them grow up to be a mass murderer? No.
Yeah.
I definitely think that is a nature. That's genetic. That is wired in your brain. I mean,
I agree. There's something off.
Yeah, and that's what's so fascinating to me is trying to figure that out.
Because we're all, human nature, we're born with, for the most part, I think that we're all born with sympathy. Like, unless you go into like personality disorders, which people lack empathy. They lack all of these things, which is that nature. So
in ABA, in working with kids with autism, they are missing, not even kids, adults, teens, they're missing those social skills. So I teach empathy. I've had to teach sarcasm. I've had to teach it's perspective taking.
Yeah, it's seeing through the lens of another person. Okay.
And sometimes that's not there, especially with, kids with autism or adults who are on the spectrum. They're missing that. And you talk to someone who's an adult on the spectrum and they're like, they just come out and say whatever they're going to say. They just don't lack that perspective taking skill. And that's something that can be learned. So yeah, again, it is influenced by nurture. It's just how you're raised and the skills you're taught. And I think emotional coping, like you were talking about, like I wasn't raised in a home where my coping skills were anything outside of alcohol or out partying kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I do think the nature part, the biological part is definitely a huge influence.
Yeah, I agree.
People's lives.
I agree.
Being bipolar, I've literally been able to feel myself in a manic state and stop myself or talk to myself down off a cliff, basically.
Yeah.
Whereas people who aren't educated, like if I didn't have my degree in psychology and know all about behavior and things like that, I don't think I'd be able to recognize that.
Yeah.
That's super important, being able to recognize the signs of those erratic behaviors, impulsive behaviors, behaviors that aren't quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, how do you deal or cope with that anxiety, perfectionist, kind of OCD behavior that...
Yeah, so if you listened to the last episode, you kind of heard about, I talked about how I dealt with that perfectionist mentality and anxiety. And I feel that anxiety is like nature. It does run in my family. And in the nurture, I was in an environment growing up where we were taught to be, we had to always please a perfect God. And so we always had to be good. You had to be good. You had to do the right thing. The world was black and white. And if you don't do it this way, then you'll get punished. It was just like this constant, like, well, you'll never be good enough, but you have to be good enough. Like,
It's almost
do you know what
like,
I'm saying?
Yeah, like your environment brought out that anxiety.
Right. So as I grew up, I, developed behaviors because of
that were not healthy.
That were not healthy because of the things that were being fed into me in the environment that I was growing up in church, things like that, where you're told you're a bad person. And the only way to be perfect is you can't be good in this life, but you have to it's like a mind fuck.
Yeah. That's
so it's a lot. And you have to, so now being an adult and
learning coping strategies,
being aware of these, things that I was learning and soaking in as a child.
Yeah, that you can take matters into your own hands.
Right. I have to realize, like, I have to stop myself because I still feel as if I need to be perfect and everything. I feel
a little voice in your head. You have
little
to quiet
voice back
down.
there that's always telling me that I'm feeling like a little bit of guilt for this and that.
Remind them to sit the fuck down.
Exactly. Like, you're being too much right now. You need to back it down, or you need to calm. Like, it's just always there. And realizing that the world isn't black and white, it's gray. It's gray.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah, tell me.
I don't have that voice.
You're so lucky. You're so lucky.
Oh, man. But that was a product of your environment.
Yeah,
of what you were taught growing up.
Yeah, so I still have to fight, like, waking up in the middle of the night and feeling as if I'm just not doing enough. Like, I'm just not.
Oh, my God.
So...
I mean, I understand, like, mom guilt stuff. Like, I'll take a nap and I'll feel bad.
It's
I should be doing something else. But
it's just that feeling of if you're doing something wrong, or you're just like... But then I have to, like, reel it back and tell myself, like, hey,
mistakes are okay.
You're a human being, and there's no such thing as perfect, and there's no such thing as, like, good and bad.
No. So I was raised, it's not good and bad. You're not good and you're not bad. You make good choices and you make bad choices. You're your own human. It just depends on what kind of choice you
certain
make.
Consequences have or certain decisions have certain consequences. If you do a certain behavior, it may produce a negative consequence.
Yes.
That's how I have to tell myself now how to do
Cheers.
it. Cheers, because we're back with champagne. No tequila this time.
That's a one and done. That's not a real thing.
Done. Mm-mm. Okay, so back to what we were talking about. Negative or consequences because of behavior. But yeah, go into that.
Oh, consequences and behavior is like a whole realm of life, but we're not. The good and the bad. Mm-hmm. I grew up with a fuck it bucket.
Okay, what's that?
Tell
me more about this fuck it bucket.
You just put it in the bucket and you say fuck it. And you walk away. The end. That's it. That was it. I would literally, like, it was like a switch I could turn on and off. Like,
okay.
I got an F in math. You know what? Put that on a piece of paper, throw in the bucket, fuck it. It's fine. It's good. And then I would go hang out with my friends, or then I would go do something that made me feel happy. So
Okay.
I wouldn't say how I was raised was necessarily healthy, and obviously binge drinking is not a real coping mechanism, especially when you have that predisposition to alcohol, depression, or addiction, depression. Both of my parents went to rehab. Both of my parents had some sort of addiction issues and struggled with that. And that was something my whole life I was always scared about, but I was never taught anything different.
Right.
They weren't given those tools to pass on to me. And so I just did what I did. And instead of being, am I gonna be judged? Am I gonna make it to heaven?
You didn't deal with that.
I didn't
deal with those thoughts.
I learned how to throw it in the bucket and move on with my life. Yeah. So I think that the takeaway here is, when you're a child, or when you're a newborn baby out of the womb, you can't decide who your parents are. You don't get to decide your genetics. And you definitely, unfortunately, don't get to decide the environment that you're growing up in.
Yeah, as a child, you can't.
But as an adult, you can manipulate those things. You can take control of those things.
Exactly. So with this whole conversation of nature versus nurture, and what we're trying to really get at here is that no matter what your opinion is, as she said, you can't determine your genetics, and you can't choose the environment you grow up in. And the takeaway, I would say, is now as an adult, we have the ability to have that self-awareness and to see, hey, like, certain behaviors are linked to this certain thing that happened in my childhood, or that a traumatic event that happened. It doesn't even have to be because of your parents. It just could be something traumatic that happened to you when you were young. Mm-hmm. And it's realizing that those behaviors that you see yourself, struggling with, or certain behaviors that not necessarily you're struggling with, but it's something where you're like, hey, you want to change. This needs to change.
You and I talk about the victim mindset a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that ties into it so much. If you have that victim mindset, like, woe is me, and it's everything easy. Bad happens to me.
It feels good. It feels good to have that mindset sometimes. To just blame everyone else.
I know someone, I'm not going to throw them under the bus, that had a drug addiction problem. And one thing that they said to me was, well, my dad, well, my parents, and that triggered me, because my parents weren't awesome either, and but we still made choices. And it goes back to good choices, bad choices, consequences.
You just have to realize, like, hey, I'm an adult now. I have the ability to have control of my life, to have control of the environment that I'm in.
To have control of your psychiatric care, your self-care, the time you spend working on.
You have the ability to ask for help if you need it, things like that. And both Jenny and I, as we said in the beginning of the podcast, we both had very polar opposite upbringings, but at the same time, we are both very strong-willed women and people. And that is something that we have definitely cultivated as life has gone on. And
we just want to rain it on you.
Yes, we want you to take control of your life. So if you're listening today, the takeaway is like, hey, I'm dealing with this, but you know what? Fuck everybody. And fuck anything that's
bucket. Throw it in the bucket and
be like, I'm gonna choose
another path.
I'm gonna steer this behavior into another behavior.
Yeah. And if it's an environment thing, manipulate your environment. You can change the people you hang out with. you can't necessarily change your kids or your spouse or things like that, but you can definitely manipulate your environment where you are happy and feeling healthy,
right.
and being aware of when you're when you're feeling depressed, or
like we were saying, like I can feel when I'm in that like anxiety, I've got to be perfect mode. I can feel it coming on and I know when it's happening, and I have to sit back and tell myself, hey, this isn't necessarily real. And you have to do the same thing with, you know, how you were talking about with
being bipolar, when I literally hear voices in my head that tell me to do weird things. You have to separate reality from what is a good choice and a bad choice.
Yeah. What is, if this decision is going to have a negative or a positive consequence?
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. I hope that all of this made sense. And it's such a cool topic. And it's one of those where I feel as if you can just go on forever about it and just be like, but is it? But is it? But is it? Like,
and exactly. Did this influence that? And did this negative behavior cause this positive consequence?
Yeah, like talking about like serial killers or people that do like crazy shit. Like, was it nature? Was it? But you can have fun with the conversation.
We both agree it's both.
I do agree.
We also agree that we're adulting and you can't blame everything on your past. And you have to be extremely
you gotta own your shit.
Self-aware of who you are. 100.
It's self-awareness.
Especially if you have that genetics history of depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, whatever else, crazy, OCD, anxiety, all of those things. Like, be aware. Start a mood journal. Start tracking your shit. Like,
yeah, and we're going to list some resources that we really like and that we talk about all the time. And I'm sure if you go read their stuff, you're going to like it. So we're going to link them. And thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for joining us.
We hope you felt inspired by our story in one way or another.
Don't forget to click on our website located on the podcast notes or in our IG. You can fill out our survey. We'd love to hear your feedback. Like I said, I love data and I really do appreciate reading all of your comments. And
yeah, we want to get to know all of our followers and we want to hear all of your feedback.
Especially today. Like, do you have a crazy story where you disagree with us and you want to tell us something really cool?
Pray tell, child.
You can also submit your ideas for future topics. We've already had a couple people vote, which is really exciting. I checked and we have some people that have asked about some different topics. So that's up next to decide. But thank you if you did the IG poll.
Yes, thank you guys. Once again, this is Naked with Socks, where we assess the mess with finesse. Cheers.